welcome everybody. We hope you're not too tired or too full from lunch. For the last decade, sustainability has been either a PR story or a compliance obligation. But as our friend introduced just a few seconds ago, right now we see how companies are embedding sustainability in their business models to gain a competitive advantage. But sustainability is a word that has been overused, and it means 100 different things for 100 different people. So I would love to start by getting your definitions of what sustainability is in the business context.
Okay, I think it's a very good question because I hear all kinds of terminology also about that. For me and for Lumo, we see it as embedding social and environmental responsibility into the core business models of your company to drive value. And then I mean creating positive impact, but also financial results to that.
Okay, we'll see how that goes. Nick, what is yours?
Yeah, no, I thank you, Gloria, because I also sometimes always ask, like, what color is in these t-shirts? And everyone would say, oh, it's definitely green, and then there would be discussions. But then the minute you ask, what is a sustainable t-shirt, there'd be, I don't know, if there's 5 people in the room, there'd be 15 answers. And
but though I think our colors today match quite well.
Yeah, I know. We didn't want to have that question. And also, Claudia's green.
This wasn't on purpose.
I think, to your question, I think we tend to define it as a very important function within a corporate that identify the areas of risk of such corporations from an environmental, a social, and a governance perspective. It is a risk assessment and a compliant function that has a very important responsibilities to identify those areas of risk and make those risks known to the rest of the organizations.
Yeah. Okay, so
go ahead.
No, it seems that it's a risk mitigation practice. So when you're evaluating a company, out of all the companies that you have access to, what tells you that this strategy, this risk mitigation strategy is actually in the business model?
Well, I think 2 things. Really, the business model should be how you earn your dollars or your euros, should be really aligned with positive impact. Because if it's a misalignment, then as soon as there's, I always say, American VC coming in, the impact is gone. So 1 is really the alignment in that sense, and 2, we want to see it really as a strategic element in the business. And if you use it as a strategic element in the business, then it really can help with the business resilience, with the talent allocation, but also as to create a trusted brand in that sense.
I guess that is how we defined sustainability, which is a part of organizations. And I think when that becomes more valuable is when the risks are known, and therefore the only options to mitigate risk is to actually innovate. And I think this is when we need to be extremely sector specific, because again, what applies to energy does not apply to pharmacy, does not apply to the automotive sectors, doesn't apply to the fashion sector. So I think I always try to be as specific and as objective as possible. But again, if we, for example, focus on supply and value chain visibility, which is sort of like a sustainability and a compliant aspects, pharmaceutical tends to have 99.5 visibility on the supply and value chains of their products. Automotive has 95%. If we look at fashion, they have 21%. And so that then translates into phenomenal environmental risk and also toxicity risk. And, but this becomes non-material challenges until someone is able to pinpoint down the exact material risk. So to say that one has no visibility is not a CEO concern. To be able to identify that 14% of your top line revenues have lost because you do not control or own your secondary market, then that's something tangible. And so that's, I think, when we start considering sustainability moving into a competitive advantage.
This makes sense, but it's still a bit vague. You were mentioning like how do you align social impact with the investments or the decisions that you make, right? But could you guys give us a concrete example of a company that has done that well, and that you could share a little bit more about how how they've done it?
Yeah. I can mention one of our portfolio companies. It's called Hulo AI. And they developed an AI technology on top of the sensors which are currently in the water pipelines, every 200 to 300 meters. And because of the new technology, they can very early on determine leakage within the water pipeline. You have a few other companies that can do that, but what they can also do is say, hey, listen, the chance is 95% that in this part of the water pipeline, the leakage is there. And if you now look at how the water treatment is done today in the cities, they say for every leakage, just let it leak because it's too expensive. It is too much hassle with all the permits to repair the leakage. So, but as a result that in big cities, 40, 50, 60% of the treated water is just leaking back in the ground. And treating water, the carbon footprint, I don't have the exact numbers, but it's pretty huge. So in this case, they can actually very good measure, okay, what's the leakage? What can be saved in that sense? And they make it possible and affordable to not open the total street, but also make sure that within like 2-3 square meter, they can drill in one day, repair the leakage, and therefore save water.
Nick?
I would, I mean, of course, I'd love to talk about, our most amazing 20 portfolio company, but I will not do that.
You have to choose one.
That would be cheeky. No, I think, look, in the first, I think I'd love to separate between like startups and ventures that are enabling more regenerative or circular models. I think we call them circular enablers, and that's the categories. And then there's the large corporations. So our model is entirely based in aggregating technologies that can help large corporates to become more efficient, regenerative, or more sustainable, if you will. But it's always aligning efficiency, market resource operational efficiency with margin expansions, increased profitability, and a lower impact in terms of environmental and toxicity risk. But that's not the example I love to do. The example I love to do is one of a sector that's been for many years quite stagnant and lacking of innovations, and that's space exploration. And they were just investing high capex investments into their core products, which is a rocket, and then every mission would pretty much deploy all of their capex investments into the products that would then go and explore into the air. And then you basically would get back the most important asset, e.g. the pilots, sometimes. And then there's this one guy who's quite smart who arrives and was like, guys, you kind of like are operating your business inefficiently, right? Because every time you invest billions in building these rockets and all the resources effectively are left in the space. And so his bet was like, I think I can get some of that back, and that's SpaceX. So they're just doing a $1 trillion IPO these days. And so that for me is the example of a company that is turning a quite stagnant sector that was lacking of innovations into kind of like a circular model applied to space exploration. Yeah.
You said something.
Yeah, maybe adding to that, because what I do see is that you have the big corporates, and sometimes, well, quite often, they are quite stuck. Yeah. So what we now see, for the example I just gave, is that this now scale up works with the big corporates in, for instance, Brazil, 35 million households area to bring the leakage down, and the corporate in itself would most likely not have come up with that solution themselves, so they are stuck. And therefore, I think innovation, you mentioned it, is very important. typically I don't see the innovation coming from the government or from the big corporates. I see it coming from the young, new companies. Yeah, sorry.
No, I wanted to pick up on something that you said, which is the difference between a company that sells a product or service and addresses a social or environmental problem versus a corporate or a big company that is trying to do shared value and is trying to do things right and have an impact within their operations. Do you guys have any thoughts on how can you have more impact if it's with one or the other? Because it seems that you both are on the operating on the former, on the startups that are climate tech or do waste management or do.
Yeah, no, I have the questions to that, which I'm keeping on my paper, and I think that maybe is the answer. You know, and the question is, when was the last time you did something for the first time? And I think, I don't know, maybe we don't have the time to answer here, we can answer that later. But I think you will find that if someone operates in a startup environment or in an innovation environment or even in an investment environment, their answer is going to be, oh, yesterday, today, and tonight, and the other day, because we live in a world of innovations. We live in a world of risk-taking. You know, when was the last time someone started from Europe and then discovered a new way to India? You know, just so this is one word. Corporates are by nature, and there's no judgment, are just large organizations that need to identify, mitigate, reduce risk. So innovation, you know, for somebody is what they thrive and live for, and for others is just like the biggest risk. And so I think what we are trying to do is, again, acknowledge the most innovative companies on the planet that can mitigate environmental and social risk, toxicity being one from environmental, for example. And then we try to create systems that can mitigate the risk of the corporates, acknowledging that change doesn't happen overnight, and it's stressful, and it's cross-functional, cross-disciplinary, and it's not always related to incentive. So I guess our way is by investing in solutions is not enough. We aggregate solutions and de-risk pilot so that we can work with large corporates and they can de-risk their adoption of innovations.
Interesting, thank you. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, because I'm sure there's some skeptics in the room that are thinking that this is great, that it's great to try to mitigate risks, that it's great to think about social and environmental impact. But ultimately, if you're an investor and you want to invest in these companies, you ultimately want to make money. Even if you know that you're going to have to be a bit more patient and think more about the long term than the short term, the ultimate goal is still to make money. So explain how these types of companies contribute financially or positively financially to returns.
Well, first of all, I think that a company can only be impactful if it's also financially resilient, because if you don't sell your product or your services, then the impact typically is limited because you will not exist at one point anymore as a company. From there, I think it's really important to, as I mentioned before, bring sustainability into the strategic element of your company. And that we then determine with our portfolio companies, not KPIs, but KVIs, key value indicators, which we just also manage on. And we are pretty large in the Benelux now, if not the largest AI investor. AI also means computing power. So we have to take those kind of things into account, that even if you save the world with AI, you have a negative element into that you use the computing power. So it all starts with, in my opinion, awareness and then computing, and then it's more or less what I hear you say, baby steps, where we all want to go faster, but it's step by step that you have to take it.
I thank you. I think that's a great questions, and even there we always, I always try to separate, because there's a lot of confusion, and confusion doesn't really help. We believe that capital is inefficiently allocated and deployed with high concentrations of risk into private investors, and those who are extremely passionate about the sectors. because there's a lot of confusion. So I think the market and the media is deliberately kind of like feeling this debate that capitalism is only extractive and nature is only not profitable, and there's Trump and Greta. And that's kind of like, it's been going on for 10 years. So I think that's quite a sterile sort of like conversation that hasn't really helped either the capital markets or the nature markets. And it's frankly unproven. I think so. We are seeing, we've been investing into regenerative models that have high yield, high returns, high impact. So regenerative capital can deliver both high returns, higher returns, and social, environmental, and toxicity reductions impact. So I think it's a pure myth that one does not correlate to the others. In fact, particularly in Europe and UK, the two, both impact and returns are compounding value, and there are instruments that are going to accelerate that. Now, let's make an example. Let's make a tangible example. So if we look at one market, let's say consumer and retail is a market we know better than others. Like every second, that's $50,000 going into the toilets, like literally just going into the toilets, not metaphorically, just literally being wasted. So out of $30 trillion, there's $50,000 every second. So that is $1.5 trillion that go into the toilet. And so the companies that are operating with these inefficiencies are not performing well. And this is before we get into specific, like surely the news of a large company selling garments with 300% of the toxicity limit, that doesn't help. I think the stock market went down 62%. No, it's not Ferrari, it's not the Luce. So there are commercial inefficiencies that drive financial risk at corporate level. If we look in venture, the notions of a green premium or sustainability versus that's again, it's a dated conversation. We're quite lucky because we do receive like 2,000 to 3,000 companies every year, so we have a quite firm view on the market. But these new generations of venture, whether we're looking at most amazing biotech innovations, deep tech innovations, or even like some new marketplace that rent or resell products, these are highly profitable ventures, and they are replacing, if we're looking at supply chain, they're replacing sort of like legacy materials by coming to market with new biotech solutions that outperforms in terms of price, products, performance, and they are non-toxic and carbon negative. So these are not just like, oh, look at the nice startups. These are just literally disrupting entire sectors. And we're talking about multi-billion plays with 35 to 45 EBITDA multiples. So these are not, here's a nice sustainable ventures. These are large sort of like disruptor in the markets. And the same is for retail. I mean, Vinted, Vinted is a e-commerce platform, and they're just creating the secondary market, which is a way to again make products circular. Vinted, Vestiaire, or closest to us by rotations, the Seam, Sojo, the others. These are high growth SaaS model. So I think there's a lot of confusions out there, but as soon as we start bringing data, then there's clarity and the opportunities emerge.
So maybe you've given me the hint for the last question, which is, what's the unlock, right? Because clearly there's a lot of companies that are doing very well, and they have these, they have both. They have this impact, and they also have the financial performance. But there's a lot of companies that still don't, that they're just focused on the financial performance and don't really care about how they do things. So what needs to happen? Maybe it's the data, but or what else that can help all companies bring this impact lens into their operations?
No, I think it's very much sector specific and company specific, and appreciate each corporate sees design as a different entity. And but I think data, objective data, allow to assess risk, but and assessing risk also allow to assess the opportunities. And I think the first immediate step is reducing inefficiencies, because that is where there's now leakage of values. And so, I don't know, looking at simple things to implement from today would be, okay, how about how much stock you have sitting in your warehouse, how much product is being wasted in your, kind of like non-performing design, how much of your value chain is actually transparent, how much of your product is being sold and is actually your product, how much do you know about your, primary and secondary markets. And so these are very simple, very much commercial related performance that everyone in organizations can bring up and lead to short-term either risk mitigations and reductions of either losses or wasted and start creating margin expansions. So that can happen in specific sectors immediately, and then other sectors have a slightly longer journey. But again, our interpretations of, we focus more on circularity, but for us it's about driving resource market operational efficiencies to allow margin expansions, increase profitability at lower volumes, and that if we combine the two, then that drives a lower environmental impact and a lower sort of like societal impact.
For you?
Adding to that, I think data is really important, of course, because with data you can convince people.
Well, and you prove these
exactly,
skeptics.
Yeah. And on top of that, I would say what I typically see is that, and I've been talking to quite some C-level people of companies that are on the stock market, and they say, what a great job you have because you can look 9-10 years ahead. I have 3 months, and if I do well after 3 months, I'm punished because of the shares that are going to be sold again. So I think it's really important that we as a society, because I fully agree on company level and corporate level, but as a society, we should start thinking more long-term, and if you talk about sustainability, it's a long game. So we have to think about the long term. Also as government, typically what we see here is 2-3 years that people can change something because the last year they are already trying to make sure that they are re-elected. We have to also there look long term, and we, in my opinion, should not look country by country, but as Europe more and more in that sense. And as a last thing, I would say we have to look at ourselves because we all are working somewhere, and maybe you own a company or you are an employee. I think we, as the people, can say to the politicians, hey guys, this is what we want to vote, and please do that. And we can say, I'm not going to sell or buy a product, a t-shirt anymore at this company because I don't believe that. And if we, as a society, start to do that, I think that's the major step. It's up to us. We have to take the first step.
Thank you so much to both of you. I hope this was interesting. If you guys have any questions, you can stop these two amazing minds right after the talk. Thank you so much.
Well, free, you too.